Right. I'd like to call to order the August 19th, 2026 regular meeting of the South Burlington School Board. The first item on our agenda is a proposed executive session. What we're going to talk about is employment of a public officer or employee and receive confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal services to the board. I would entertain a motion to find the premature public knowledge of what we're about to talk about would put the district at a significant disadvantage.
I move.
Jen moves, Dan seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. Jen moves.
So,
Dan seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. We're now in executive session. We're going to go in with Joe Clark. We are probably also going to speak with Mick Letty, district lawyer, and we'll be returning to the regular meeting about 6 o'clock. I'd like to call back into order the August 19th, 2026 regular meeting of the South Burlington School Board. We were just in executive session. We just talked about employment of a public officer or employee and received confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal services to the board. We were joined by Joe Clark, superintendent, and Mick Letty, district counsel. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do you have any announcements? No announcements, so we'll review the agenda. The next item is comments from the public, then the student report, then the first reading of the ends policy update. That is a community forum, so if there's a community member who wants to talk back and forth with the board in full forum, we would be able to do that. Then we have discussion items about finance stuff. So first reading of revisions to executive limitation 2.4 financial condition and activities, and then an actual monthly financial report, which would be the first of a monthly set of reports that are not themselves monitor reports, but replace the quarterly monitor reports. And then we have an action item where we actually have to appoint an additional board member to the Act 170 merger committee. And then there's the superintendent's report, and then there's the consent agenda. Are there any concerns about the agenda? All right, hearing none, the next item on the agenda is comments from the public. So there are 3 opportunities for the public to comment at this time about any topic whatsoever. Also, before the board takes action on an action item, but only on the topic being action. And thirdly, in a specially warned community forum, though only on the topics warned on the agenda. The board generally will not respond to public comments, except in the context of a community forum, and even then only on the topics that are warned for that community forum. Please don't violate anyone's privacy, and official complaints or grievances cannot be filed during public comment. Do we have any public comment?
So nobody on.
Nobody still. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the student representative report.
So our students are wrapping up their summer activities as the upcoming academic school year begins on the 24th for incoming 9th graders and the 25th for all students. The 2026 SLAM leaders at the high school are getting prepared for the incoming freshman class. All the SLAM leaders are going to the Colbert Outdoor Center tomorrow to engage in an activity for team building and leadership.
The 2026 SLAM leaders at the high school. Oh, hold on. Sorry. All sports have begun. Field hockey, soccer, volleyball, cross country, football, and soccer pre-seasons have all started. The first reading will be on the 28th. Good luck to all that.
It's the end of the student report.
All right. Board have any questions, students? Are you excited to be back?
I guess so.
I think I'm sorry, I think you said the 24th was the first day, I believe 25th.
Oh, sorry, I think, oh yeah, that was the other day, I think.
Yeah.
It was the 25th for all the ninth graders and the 26th for all
Yep,
students, right?
there you go, great. You have me a little worried there. Thanks, Albert.
Any other questions from the board? Students? All right, the next item on the agenda is a community forum for the ends policy update. And this is the first reading of the proposed policy, so I'm going to log on and show that on my screens. Joe, you're already logged on, you can put on your screen. So the ends policy, just to give anybody who's watching this recording some context, is the kind of the foundational document of our governance model. And what that means is it's kind of like the constitution of our district. It is where we say what is important. It's not where we say how things are done, but it says what things kind of need to happen. And it was originally written about 12 years ago, and we are updating it for the first time in 12 years. We started this process back in January. We have done, I think this is our 6th community forum. It's probably our 8th time or 10th time talking about it. We did focus groups and we did a community survey. And so what we're looking at now is the outcome of all of that work, trying to take what we as elected representatives believe our constituents want, plus any additional community feedback that we receive either through public forums or email or the focus groups. So would you actually go to the other document that we have?
On the crosswalk,
No, there's a,
the one that changes, so.
there's one that's just, if you go to the school board package. Yeah,
This one.
all right, so I'm gonna read this, even though we don't need to. Just so that it's such an important document, but it's also very short. So this is the proposed new ends policy. 1.0, purpose of the South Burlington School District. The South Burlington School District exists so that every student is prepared for adult life by their equitable access to and effective engagement with high-quality education. 1.1, expected outcome, rigorous academic achievement. Global outcome, students will continuously improve on rigorous academic expectations in core subject areas. Sub-bullet 111, academic achievement for students will continuously improve on Vermont state standards in the core academic subjects of English language arts, math, and science. Sub-bullet 112, students will demonstrate grade level proficiency in foundational literacy as defined by Vermont Early Learning Standards by the end of grade 3. Sub-bullet 113, multilingual students will continuously improve on Vermont State English Language Proficiency Standards. Sub-bullet 114, achievement gaps for historically marginalized student groups will continuously narrow, with all groups showing systematically increasing achievement. Sub-bullet 115, students will benefit from ready access to arts, digital learning, financial literacy, health, music, physical education, social studies, world language. 1.2, expected outcome, well-rounded skills. Global outcome, students will develop well-rounded skills that prepare them for success in learning and for their transition to adult life. Sub-bullet 121, Middle and high school students will benefit from ready access to career and technical education. Sub-bullet 122. Students will gain practical experience from ready access to co-curricular opportunities such as clubs, athletics, mentorships, internships, and volunteer service partnerships. Sub-bullet 122. Students will demonstrate age-appropriate understanding of how to effectively engage in the classroom, complete assignments on time, arrive for class prepared and on time, express views respectfully and learn from the views of others, apply financial literacy skills, participate in national, state, and local democracy, practice inclusion of all peoples, use artificial intelligence appropriately. 1.3 Expected outcome, readiness for adult life. Global outcome. Students and their families will be aware of the opportunities after high school that interest them and well prepared to take advantage of them. Sub-bullet 131. Middle and high school students will take age-appropriate steps towards career entry, apprenticeship, 1 or 2 year general or technical degree certification, 4-year or more degree certifications, community, military, or global service. 1.4 Expected outcome, community trust and legitimacy. Global outcome, community members trust that the district is delivering valuable educational outcomes for all students and that the cost is reasonable given limited resources. Sub-bullet 141. Community members have ready access to evidence-based, longitudinal cost-benefit analyses of district performance and expected outcomes 1.1 to 1.3 prior to each budget vote. Sub-bullet 142. Ratings provided by representative groups of community members improve over time. So the thing I would say about this document is that, we try to use as few words as possible, and we try to make sure that every word had a reason behind it. And so something that I learned in the process of developing this document were, as I understand it, kind of the right way to talk about academic achievement, for example. So if you scroll down just a little bit, in the 1.1.1, which is academic achievements for students will continuously improve on Vermont state standards. There were a lot of different ways that we could have said we want more rigor in our academics, but this one is targeted specifically at the Vermont standards, which at least the subcommittee thought were good standards and anyway what we have to do. And so we didn't inject our opinions, I don't think, about anything here. This is about as cut and dry as you can be. And I think that we have tried to maintain that standard throughout the whole document.
Oliver brought up something last week about adding, what was it, history or social studies, or
Yeah.
that's something that we were supposed to look into and do, or?
Yeah, so what we did is it was also under the skills section of expected outcomes. So what we did is we actually separated these because they are truly academic areas. Thank you, Oliver. That was a great catch. To include them in 1.1 and then expand a bit on the co-curriculars. But what we did is we took the list of the remaining standards off of the Vermont educational standards site. So these are the, as Sheva said, you know, one of the benefits of this approach is that it aligns exactly with the EQS, right? So it's not setting 2 targets for the district, and ideally that, you know, increases the likelihood that, you know, these things will be connected. And also, I think, I would hope, I don't know, but I hope that it decreases some of the frustrations or difficulty or challenge associated with trying to, you know, magically align what we say in our standards with what's in the Vermont state standards, knowing that the district is responsible for meeting, you know, whatever is in this document and
And the reason that social studies is not listed in 111 is because those are the top three, or I'm sorry, those are.
There is a clear emphasis on those core academic subjects. And those are the ones for which there are consistent measures. So for those that say we'll continuously improve, there are baked in measures that are built to very high standards. That can be used to measure those.
And then can you talk a little bit about the word well-rounded?
It's a breakdown of, you know, between achievement and skills. And what we tried to bring out here, what we heard from the community very strongly was the need to elevate those so-called transferable skills, those things that we all need to improve our learning and to improve or to be prepared to live in the adult world, right? So things that are related to strong communication, things that are related to personal accountability, like showing up on time, finishing your assignments on time, things like that. Arrive for class prepared. These are some unusual things, I will say. The way that they're written is not how they're typically written. I think in a lot of the policies that I've seen, but I think they do very much reflect what we heard pretty much over and over from students all the way up through, you know, the adults in our community.
Isn't well-rounded a reference to like a federal standard or something like that?
Well-rounded? No, I don't.
I think you told me that, I looked it up.
Oh.
I'm sure it is. So maybe we should look a little bit further down. Can you talk a little bit about why we separated readiness for adult life from the well-rounded skills?
Because this had more to do, so when we think of skills, we think of the skills, the, you know, what outcome we want for students in terms of skills. The preparedness for adult life is more on the being aware of what the opportunities are that are available to students, getting the kinds of supports that you need to understand how to pursue, and then actually making plans for pursuing based on your, you know, your skills, your interests, your passions. I did notice there's still a couple of little like wordy tweaks in there. It might not be in this one. I think we might have to, it's not wordsmithing, it's more like there's a missing word I saw somewhere as you were reading.
So what, could I
yeah,
reflect on this for a second?
Yep.
So one of the goals from the beginning has been to give the superintendent something that is measurable, right? And so a lot of the previous ends policy had things in it that I think we've all agreed were kind of wishy-washy and hard to pin down, right? And so we were struggling a lot through this particular section on readiness for adult life until somebody said, okay, well, really what we're looking for is proof that kids are actually taking steps towards readiness for adult life. And I think what you said, Michelle, was like, we're not saying that like a middle schooler needs to say, oh, I'm gonna go to a job fair and, you know, sign
Determine
up.
my life.
Yeah, determine my life. And so so what we're asking for here is like proof of age appropriate steps towards all these things that kids can do when they're older. And that's one of the things that I heard from like the head of the electricians union. And I think we heard it from a couple other people is like, you know, kids shouldn't have to wait until 11th grade to think about what is interesting to them and what they might want to spend the rest of their life doing. So I just wanted to highlight of all the different things we could have said about this, the one bullet point in here is, and the one thing that the superintendent will be tested on is, are kids taking age appropriate steps, you know, as interpreted by the superintendent? And that's what we really wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I would say one other thing that we wanted to highlight with this one is that to communicate really clearly and really strongly that college isn't the only path. And this gives pretty equal footing in terms of the opportunities that are out there for kids coming out of high school. And to your point, put some emphasis on the fact that that preparation doesn't start, you know, when everybody's applying for college. It can start much earlier than that in terms of assessing interest, you know, taking perhaps classes in high school associated to test it out, you know, like it's a long path, and we start down one path and sometimes we change course, but to be aware to the best of our ability of what those possibilities are, I think is only a good thing.
Right.
I think this would also, I mean, naturally, we would follow up on students, right? So when they're not done when they leave here, we follow up to make sure, what are you doing? Are you enrolled in school? Do you have a job? And, you know, by looking at that data, that would show how successful we are in preparing them if they're actually doing that when they graduate.
That would be, that's the gold standard.
Yeah.
You may, if we could go to the last section. So I think the difference between the previous policy and this policy is that this one, in a way, it requires the superintendent to ask the community what they think, right? And what we're saying here, similar to the academic rigor part, is that we want things to improve. We want the line to go up, right? We want a representative sample of the community. So that means not just parents. That also means not just, you know, retirees, you know, but across the community, we want people to feel like we're giving the community the right outcomes for the right price. So this is a you know, again, this is something that we would expect to monitor, have a monitoring report where the superintendent is saying, you know, like, look at these representative, you know, groups in the community and what they're saying about the schools. And I think that that is directly tied to everything from passing budgets to the community being willing to invest in new facilities, you know, so that's the first draft that we would like to propose for our colleagues' consideration.
We had a pretty robust discussion about these at a leadership meeting earlier in the week, and some of the folks on the team very impressed with what is going on here, and also some questions. And I'm going to see, I'm looking at the back of the room to see if anybody who was in that meeting wants to add any input to where is it? Yeah,
Yes, please.
if you'd like to, please come on. Thanks, Kat. Kat Ewan is your member as our new Director of Equity, Belonging, and Family Engagement.
Hello. Hi, I will admit, when I saw the proposed ends, I had a pretty immediate reaction to culling out our multilingual students and our historically marginalized groups. And through the course of our discussion, I was able to identify that reaction was really the result of how the phrasing feels like an obligation for the students to perform additional acts of success, as opposed to how we will support them in additional achievement. Which I think is my succinct, that was my initial reaction. I think there's a lot of value in identifying the additional groups in terms of then we are obligated to ensure they are meeting those standards of success. And it's just those like little tweaky word choices.
Right.
You know what I really like? Did everybody have access to your side by side? Cause I think that was really cool, the way you guys did that, this thing. For 2014 next to the 2026, and you can see, did they see that?
I put it on the slide. Do you
You were
want?
last week, yeah.
That was really cool, because if there were specific words that were taken out or were modified, you can see where and how they were pulled into the new draft. That was pretty slick. Cause there were things that I was looking at, like, what happened to this? Demonstrating independent thought, curiosity, and creativity. Well, that specifically was removed because how do you measure that, right? But then there were other things, so I don't know if you can pull that up.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to respond, like, I think what you're pointing to is that. The document, it's kind of like that last section 1.4 about expecting the community's ratings to improve over time. It's like, the way you read it, it's like we're obligating the community to think better about us over time. But the implication of every phrase is the superintendent will make it happen that this thing happens.
That
So
we're
I think,
approving.
yeah, so I think it's like, I'm not sure how to resolve that, and I wanna know, like, to what extent are you concerned that it will, like, how concerned are you that it will send the wrong message in terms of imposing additional obligations, like, how big of a deal is that, and what particular harms can cause, and what mitigations could there be?
Well, can I ask, I mean, if you're looking in the 2014 policy, did you have specific areas that were removed? That were altered? And maybe you guys discussed this last week and I just missed it. But if there's specific areas,
And we didn't discuss it in our meeting either. I think I think we mentioned a phrase that might, a simple phrase that might get what we're talking about, which was. Staff will ensure, or SBSD employees will ensure that these things are met, instead of. So we still are measuring it, but we're taking what some would see as an onus on the students and putting it on the staff.
We would have to
But
apply
that's,
that to
that's
all.
actually what I don't understand about the comment. I appreciate the comment, but I wanna make sure that I actually understand the point that you're trying to make, because I don't think I do. What do you mean by putting extra on the student?
Scroll down to the one that.
Yeah.
That one, would you actually click on?
What is,
Which one?
what is
1.3.
extra, and what is like, I hear that you had a negative percent, you had a negative reaction to that.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that it is negative, it's just identifying.
But I wanna understand it because I can't really comment at all
Yeah.
if I don't understand.
So we already have essentially, right, all students,
Scroll down.
sorry, this is really hard for some of my brain works.
So
Student-
at least in our analysis, there wasn't anything in the old draft that spoke to this, so we don't have any words from the old draft.
No, my impression is that it is a new and intentional emphasis on how we will support our students who have historically not been successful. Is that, okay,
That is
Yeah.
absolutely,
That's it.
absolutely, yeah.
that's the way I took it.
Do you
Right.
feel it puts the pressure on the student instead of the staff?
I would say reading that wording of students will, students will, students will. And it becomes an increasingly narrow field of students who will. So all students will meet their proficiency in language, in math. EL students will meet their EL proficiency. Our historically marginalized students will additionally bridge this gap, which I don't think is the intention.
Right.
Um,
Well, the intention is actually because ends are by definition about outcomes. So I don't think that saying staff will make sure that, because that's gonna be in the strategic plan, right? Like, that's the how to get to the end.
Right, and it's also if they you can't be judged on effort in that sense, which I don't think is what you're suggesting. I think what my reaction to what you're saying is that if we were to identify a way to clarify that the onus is on the superintendent to make sure that multilingual learners do better, we would have whatever sentence, whatever phrase that we added, we'd have to add it to every single sentence.
Right,
It
or,
couldn't just be for this, which is, so maybe there is something we can
Or
find.
just add it at the very, again, I'm not, I have the very beginning, with the
But
very beginning.
I think that's what the point, their point is, that they're bringing up is that, like, why are we calling out alternate students? And I could be wrong. But like, it's not, like, we're not saying like, we already have, like, all students will excel.
Because it's a special case of, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt them.
And I could be taking that wrong, but it's like, yeah, like, we're calling out those specific students to continuously improve. on additional standards that we're not calling out.
But it's on one standard.
I think the thing is that, like, I guess what I'm saying, maybe this is related to what you're saying, is like. The invisible words in front of every single one of these sentences is the superintendent will ensure that, the superintendent will ensure
Can I
that.
suggest a really small potential language change instead of, for example, multilingual students will? Multilingual student outcomes will continuously improve.
Oh, that's perfect,
Yeah.
yes, okay, I see what you, I absolutely 100% agree.
And maybe less onus to then look through the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah, for me, that's implied in looking at the standards, right, because that's a very specific case of multilingual students have a special need. To me, it's not inappropriate to call that out because it is a separate and really important thing for success in English and succeeding in their academics, where those academics occur under English language instruction, right? And yet if the student does not have sufficient English proficiency to fully access, then they are at a disadvantage, right? It's also, it's already in the full like federal accountability system, as you all know.
I think that's brilliant, because the verb is will, right? It changes the subject from students to outcomes.
Yeah. That's perfect.
114?
And we might even tweak it a little more, like their English language proficiency outcomes will improve, something like flip that full
Yeah,
sentence around.
I think my reaction was to continuously seeing subgroups of students and the students will do this and the students will do this. And I understand with the overarching framing, it's
Right.
the responsibility of,
Right.
but as a student reading this, what am I responsible for? A number of our students can stop at 1.1.2. And then a number of our students have to kind of keep going to what they're expected to do.
1.4 looks to me like it would be proper, right? Achievement gaps for marginalized students will continuously narrow. Maybe the second part of all group showing, I don't know. But I think what you said is brilliant. Outcomes will improve.
Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, that was great, that was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with my density.
I had provided you some thoughts earlier today, Nina. And I think it's really, really good. I think what you guys did is great. And I really liked this. This was particularly helpful to go through and see like what was out and what was in and why it was in. The one big comment that I had is I feel like under section 1.0, the top level purpose. It would be helpful to help remember why we're doing it, because I do think that this one, it was a little bit softer, like 2014. You know, when you're looking at the 2026.
Yeah.
You know, my comment there was potentially after 1.0. To add, if you go and look at 1.0 again, right there, says the South Burlington School District exists so that every student is prepared for adult life by their equitable access to and effective engagement with high quality education. Period. And I was suggesting maybe considering something like students will develop the knowledge, skills, and agency to think critically, pursue their interests, contribute meaningfully to their communities, and successfully navigate their chosen paths in adult life, or something like. The reason we're doing this is because, to me, at the end of it all, you want to have contributing members of society that are successful. And I just feel like it kind of lost a little of that, and that's what I was saying up above, that I feel like to be focused on the outcomes that we can credibly hold the superintendent to is really important, but I don't want to lose the soul of like why we're doing this. So that was my add there.
I really like what Jen just said. One of my notes for that line was to instead add to positively contribute in their adult life, because they
Yeah.
need that one, but I think your sentence is well worth considering further.
Can we? Let's. Add things.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, like just for consideration, let's concretely write down what you were just saying.
She sent it in an email, you might have that, Seamus.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can read you. Okay, so after high quality education, students will develop the knowledge, skills, and agency to think critically, pursue their interests, contribute meaningfully to their communities, and successfully navigate their chosen paths in adult life. Something like that. You know, but what you're getting at is you're doing all of this because you want to have people that are
Right, out of the parent base.
contributing positively to their communities and
Yeah.
out of their parents' basement, without saying that.
So
Something along those lines.
contributing, so what was, and Tom, you said,
This is better, so I had said instead of that for, so he's prepared for, I said. Is prepared to positively contribute in their adult life, but I like Jen's, I think she captures it with the second sentence better.
Positive members of society. Everything positive, get out of
Like dropping the word.
Yeah, in all transparency, when Seamus and I went at this over and over again. It was an effort to get, like, it takes a really long time to write something that's really short.
Oh, yeah.
But without loss of meaning, right? What I think you're highlighting here is we probably lost some of that meaning in our
Just
anxiousness to
Yeah, no.
get it really, really short, yeah.
Which is good, but it's like that to me is the why.
Yeah.
And then it does come back to the whole students will, as Kat was just saying, like, it seems like the onus is on the students, but really it's on, and I think, Joe, you know, how do we capture somewhere in there that this resides with the superintendent, right? Like, we are putting all of this together,
there is an inherent. There's like a,
It's in the other policies. But
Like
that's what the
Does
superintendent.
it not rest with the superintendent? I mean, like, the actions of carrying out these policies rest with the superintendent. But at the end of the day, like, we're doing the monitoring reports of these policies, right? So it
Well,
doesn't,
so-
it falls on the board still. like,
The-
our policies.
it's in, what it says is, policy governance says that the. Performance of the district. And the superintendent's performance are the same thing.
Yes.
So like if the district is failing in something, the only person that we can hold responsible for that is the superintendent. And conversely, anything, so does that,
But we're still
Address
holding
that.
the superintendent responsible, right?
the superintendent, yes, he's the only person we can hold responsible for.
yeah. He has the accountability for all this, ultimately.
And that's specifically articulated in the threes and the mores, so in the other part of our policy.
That's
Yes.
but so,
Is there something we can add to make it, to clarify, or is there some clarification you
no,
think?
I was just. I guess, well, cause I was just asking on like who
You know, I
these
know,
belong to, but
yeah, I know it's understood. That, you know, this is what we hope the students do, we don't expect them to do it on their own. But I think what. You want that clearly spelled out. Is that?
Like, you could have something like that.
Not in the ends.
Yeah.
No, but in,
which is why, not in here, which is why it's like R.
Yeah, I thought you were arguing against not putting something
Yeah.
like that in there.
Yeah, it's an R, it's R and
Right. But we're the governance body setting the ends, we are not accountable for. The only way that we're accountable for actually achieving these ends is hiring a superintendent who is competent to do it.
Right, and then the superintendent offers a reasonable interpretation of the ends and is responsible for the organization meeting with it.
You evaluate them against these ends.
Correct.
And it's weird, like, policy governance is a weird call.
It's hard to have this conversation, you know, like we're all humans and we're talking about each other like we're things, but that's the way, it's the structure that we're talking about.
It's the worst governance model except for all the others.
Except for all of the others.
So I did have a couple of other comments in my email that I sent you, and I was really marinating on this for a little while. The only thing that I could see possibly capturing a little bit more explicitly were critical thinking and evaluating evidence. And then civic literacy and possibly health literacy. And I consider that because for critical thinking, you know, could you, I put in here, evaluate information and evidence, consider different perspectives and use reason to form and communicate conclusions. And I was thinking about like, well, how could that be measured? And I think it could be measured through the existing Vermont, you know, ELA, math, science standards that require students to analyze information, evaluate evidence, reason, and support conclusions, I think.
That's the logic. So not everything that you said in your list is in there, but much of it is
Yeah.
in there. And so that's one of those places we got very brief for one for the brevity, but more because the way that those things are written in the standards, it has all of that scaffolding that speaks to our professional educators to actually make those things happen, as opposed to us just saying, think critically. Well, what does that mean? Right? That means different things to different people, but within the standards, it has a very specific meaning in terms of that progression of learning. It doesn't mean it's the perfect answer, it just, that's the rationale for why we
Okay.
have
I mean, I
proposed
think-
this way.
Where we had some editorializing was where we picked things in well-rounded skills. That was, I think, where we really had the most of our own opinion in going into it, right? And so like, you know, you might say that you wanna have critical thinking in there, and I might say that I wanna have use artificial intelligence appropriately. And that's like and we should have the discussion is what belongs in the things that we're gonna specifically call out. Cause there's a ton of skills that
Oh, yeah.
essentially our policy is saying that's a professional educator's job, and if they do it well, we don't have to tell you, you know, writing a clear and concise and organized manner. That is in the English language arts standard. That's not our job to tell them how to do it. But things like critical thinking, like, you know, that is a little bit more,
Well, where's the evidence that you are producing critical thinkers?
well, it's hopefully in the standards that, you know, you can write a thesis and
And then the other one, and then I had civic literacy, demonstrate age appropriate understanding of how history, government law, economic shape communities. Maybe not as much. I hear what you're saying. Then the last one I
well, we
had,
kept that. Or I think we made that, well,
civic literacy.
right, participate in national, state, and local democracy.
Okay,
We don't have a whole section about it.
right, okay. Okay,
But it
health
is-
literacy.
I think it is an opportunity to highlight, right? So when we did a little bit of this in our discussion. And had some things in and took some things out, and had some things in and took some things out. One of them was age, if, try to stay on that list, demonstrate age appropriate understandings of how to engage in healthy behaviors, I think was what the bullet said. So I feel like there's room for us as a board and based on additional community feedback to expand and contract that skills with these kinds of things, because I think it elevates, so for example, there are financial literacy standards, so those are called out in 1.1, but it's also called out in 1.2 because it's like, put an exclamation point on it, right? And so if there are other things that we have, either, you know, we say they're embedded in the standards, or they're just simply not called out here as a skill that we value, or that we have all heard from the community that we value, I think there's room to put some more in there. And I actually would like to propose one myself at the appropriate time, but I think we haven't gone through your list yet.
Well, my last one was just the health literacy. Cause I feel like that was right, it was mentioned.
Right,
Like
it's-
in. wherever it
It's
was
technically
there.
here.
Yeah, it was just, and I called it out as applying age appropriate health and wellness knowledge to make informed decisions about personal well-being. And I know that there's health education assessments and all of that, but I was just putting more of an emphasis on that, because I was thinking of physical health, mental health. emotional, like all of, I was trying to
Right.
capture that a little bit more robustly than. I mean, when I read that through the first time, I was just thinking like, oh, PE. You know,
I like the way you phrase that one.
health literacy.
Maintain physical and mental health.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
I
a
mean, but
quick,
whatever, I'm just, huh?
just a quick thing, 1.2.2 is.
Oh, it's double.
Through age appropriate.
I mean, this is the right time to do it. We're in public
Age
meeting.
appropriate health and wellness knowledge to make informed decisions about personal well-being. Yeah, but that was it. Those were my comments. And I just, again, huge improvement, awesome. You were part of that committee too, weren't you?
I stepped back, so I was
Oh.
gone for the entire month of July.
Oh, okay.
So thank you to Michelle
Okay.
Davis for all the work. That's, yeah. that's great.
Yeah.
Tell me text to put in here. And if you wanted to put in something in here,
I'm gonna ask it as a question first, and then I'll tell you what my
Don't
idea
worry.
is, but what's it?
better delete.
How much health for personal use?
Well, I need language for it.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So kind of circling back to the point
Bullet
that,
language.
you want the language, I'll give you the language. Use any services and or accommodations to which they are entitled by law.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And let me explain that a little bit. I've asked a lot of people, including myself, over and over and over. Again. I've had an email discussion with a community member. With staff. And the source of this is really, you know, we know that we've had some challenges around implementing IEPs. I know that the leadership team is doing a great deal of work toward improvements related to special education generally and many specific things. All of that work, extremely applauded and really, really grateful for it. The question is, how do we, or should we, is there an outcome that we can talk about in that respect that is above and beyond the single bullet we have about historically marginalized student groups, because that is really where students with disabilities and students who require accommodations. That's that they are included in that historically marginalized language. Do we want to call it out somewhere else? This is my one idea of how to call it out.
I like that because one thing is administering a better special education program with better results. And the other thing is kind of like giving people the tools to continue to take advantage of the accommodations society has provided throughout their life. You know, like not just because you have a great special education director.
Right. Those things that lower barriers for accessing learning and demonstrating that students know and can do are only as good as their use. And students need to be a part of that. My two cents, but I don't know, I would love to hear from.
I think that's a really powerful
Others.
ad.
And it is related to financial literacy in a way, you know.
That'll be a good
Well,
way to
it's
wrap up
it's related to all of
Put
it.
it on
the
the
list.
list.
Yeah,
Again,
so that might be a good way to wrap up the list.
Well, did you want to put in?
you mean this thing?
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think that should be the last item.
and
It's like really big drop.
for Jen's thing, because, you know, simple, apply health and wellness knowledge to make informed decisions.
Yeah, personal well-being.
By health and wellness knowledge, you know, informed decisions, not personal.
So this is what if about personal
Well, it's,
being, so if Michelle had written this during our drafting process, I would have said, Michelle, why do you need these extra words?
Yeah, take it out.
because you have applied financial literacy skills.
Yeah, just make apply health and wellness.
But maybe it's like, but you were saying mental too, you know, that's why I was saying, you know, maintain mental and physical health through how, you know,
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
Holistic.
I mean, what if it was something short like that? Like, what else do we need besides just telling, you know,
That's
saying?
it, and it needs to be age appropriate. Which you have.
That's a better.
I'm too old to see.
I know my problem. You know, maybe a good question.
Please,
When I see this list of my.
well, by the way, would you just have to just step forward so that it's on the recording?
Sorry. My clarifying question is, is this list the list for which the superintendent is gonna be responsible for showing measurement of achieving?
Yes, there's the default answer to that is yes, and if there's something in here that's like, are you really gonna be measuring us on, and if you're skeptical about it, that's what we wanna know about now. Cause in the ends policy, everything should be monitored.
Right, I don't know that I'm skeptical, I think I'm more curious about how as someone who could be tasked with measuring them. Let's just imagine for a minute, that I'm tasked with measuring them. I'm wondering how I'm going to find evidence of some of these items. That is
Let's take
one of the,
How do you measure if somebody's using artificial intelligence appropriately?
Well, I think it's, you know, I mean, just off the cuff, it's related to, are they using it to do their assignments? You know, as opposed to, are they using it as a learning tool? You know, I don't know, it's a good question, but I think it's not.
So if you tell them not to do it, are they doing it anyway?
Right, I don't think the answer is obvious, but I think it's very important that, you know.
We
It's-
think
it's
about how do
likely
we
not an
extract
assessment.
how do we extract the evidence to show it? That's what we're challenging, I think. The superintendent to do. Like,
Yeah.
this is what we wanna see. Now we think about how do we get that data to show that it's actually happened. I mean, I'm thinking about like, even with the health literacy one, you know, there are existing health education assessments. You know, can we use that? We're teaching the concepts. How do you extract it? They may learn it, but that doesn't stop somebody from going home and not following it. Right? But how do we at least show that some of these concepts are being taught to us?
And so you volunteered to tell us which ones you're curious about, so which other ones are you curious about?
so I think that a group of professionals could come up with what effective engagement looks like. That feels like low hanging fruit. Completing assignments on time feels relatively black and white. Arrive for class prepared could be operationalized. What do we mean by prepared? On time is clear. Express reviews respectfully. Respectfully could be a loaded coded term, so that one we would wanna talk about what does that mean?
Could I talk about that for a second?
Sure.
So I think what this is meant to mean is. Without imposing viewpoint discrimination, still requiring people to discuss with their peers hard topics.
Beautiful.
Well, so I just mean, like, you don't have to like.
I know. Yeah.
It's Joe's interpretation of that.
Yes,
I was gonna say, but it is like the superintendent that will interpret what it needs.
any reasonable interpretation. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, please. But you did express,
Yeah, these are just the things that as I'm looking, apply financial literacy feels like low hanging fruit also because we have financial literacy strands in curriculum. Participate in national and state and local democracy. To participate, but it's understanding how, so that's already in social studies. Practice inclusion of all peoples.
shall I comment on this?
I'm not saying I don't agree with it, I'm just saying.
How do you
it's like
show
an
it?
interesting thing to measure.
That kind of goes with expressing disrespectfully, I think. But I
And it's still important, right?
I
What
think
does
the
it look
thing
like to
about
be
this,
inclusive?
this could be in the panorama around belonging, you know, this is like, you know, we can't require you to like somebody. For example, you might have a personal belief that diversity is a bad thing, but we can still require you to include other people. You know, you're not allowed to exclude them from your, you know, playgrounds can't be a segregated space, you know. But is that another one that's a little bit iffy for you?
I don't know if it's just a matter of just as I'm sitting and listening and becoming more and more engaged with the list, I'm just wondering. Yeah, just as an important, for me, totally speaking off the cuff here, not just prepared, is that, there's the list and then there's sort of like the, thought exercise that needs to accompany it before the list could be okayed, because I think we'd want to play with like, what would that actually, what are some options of how that would look? Which would
Here's
then
our metrics.
inform, yeah, which would then inform whether or not it was a viable list.
Mhm.
Because I hear you all saying, one of the things you're valuing that I really appreciate is having this be a document that actually is supportive of the work versus creating a whole bunch of other stuff, so. Maintaining mental and physical wellness, physical is a little bit easier to measure, mental. That's a curious thing, that's a little bit different than belonging, a little bit different than mental yeah,
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll just
No,
add,
please.
and I think what I keep going back to every time every one of these is first part of the prompt, which is demonstrate understanding of how to. It doesn't mean that the kids are going to do it. It's
Good point.
demonstrating understanding of how to.
yes,
So for like mental and physical wellness, I think about the youth risk
Yeah.
behavior survey.
Yep.
That would probably give us
That
data
would.
in some of these areas.
thank you, that was really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I lost track of the understanding how to.
Yeah, and even behavioral initiatives for practice inclusion. If
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are certain types of behaviors that trickle up into everything.
Yes, yeah, that could be a measure of behaviors or discipline fractions. And it could also be, I think, with the panorama survey, there's probably strands there that would lean to that. Using an understanding of how to use any services and accommodations for which they're entitled by law.
Yeah, helping kids understand how to advocate for themselves, how to,
Get help.
And I think what this was said was probably thinking of traditionally marginalized students, but this would be really any student, as it's worded, it's any student. For students like on IEPs, there's a transition plan that probably speak to these.
yes, for the use of services or accommodations, yeah. Yep. It could be, if that was appropriate first week.
On the AI one, I'm not against including that here, but one last comment I had on this, if you go back up to the top of 1.2. You scroll up to the global outcome. I would just say for the global outcome, students will continuously improve on rigorous academic. 1.2, no, sorry, I went too far up, so 1.2.
Oh, sorry about that.
There we go. So in 1.2, the global outcome, students will develop well-rounded skills. I would add, well-rounded, relevant, and modern skills that prepare them for success in learning. And I just say that when I went to school here, I learned drafting and I learned cursive and I learned to do a decimal system. And I'm just saying we want to make sure it's still relevant and modern, and that I think would then imply that we'd be learning about crowdsourcing, gig economies, and
So you're saying
read literacy and AI. So I think if we just do relevant modern skills, that keeps it a little more open for the superintendent to interpret the technologies of the day.
I was really hoping it was gonna bring back drafting and cursive.
No, I think that's
bought
really
it.
great, it's like that elastic band.
Return.
You spend the Chromebook money on
Yeah, like, come on. I didn't say relevant modern.
Just that way we don't need to go through it and deliberate
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, we go with what's next, you know.
Not write cursive. Be able to read cursive.
beautiful thing. If you
There was
do it.
just a really, sorry to segue, there was just a very good article on why they need to bring handwriting back.
Yeah, that connection.
Critical for memory development.
I think I'm sorry to bring cursive back.
I see you have stepped up. Was there, we would love your feedback.
Again, I couldn't really see, just so I wanted to get closer so I could concentrate. Could I see the next one? Oh, no, the one that we were just working on, right there. Yes.
And no rush, take your time.
Okay, I too, am curious about 1.2.3. And when I look at the other categories, this category, what is this category? Students will demonstrate age-appropriate understanding of what? Is this lifelong learning? The skills for your, it feels like at first. Can we go back down to 1.2? It felt like that list was sort of a list of operational expectations that a principal and the teaching staff would be thinking about for the schoolhouse, for example. So we're saying engaging in the classroom, completing assignments, being on time, expressing views. What is the umbrella of that list of expectations?
I would say go to the top. Cause it goes back to well-rounded skills. So this is
Right.
preparing people going out into the world.
Or the for success.
Yes, but I think that it's almost like it's an incomplete thought, because the first one says that is about career readiness and access to career and technical education. That makes a bold statement about what that is. Could we scroll down to 1.2 point right there? Now we're talking about co-curricular opportunities, clubs and athletics. And now we're saying, we're gonna have this list of age-appropriate understanding of how to, what is the topic?
So
What do all of those things represent?
Transferable skills.
well, I think that the theory
Some
behind
are,
this
yeah.
is that if you learn how to arrive for class on time,
Sure, for a job.
then that like turns over time into adult skills. Well, I guess that's not explicit in the way that we've written that here, and it is a little bit.
Have a list of, you don't have a bulleted list under any of the other statements, and I think when you have a bulleted list like that, it starts to look different from the rest of your document. So what is the umbrella of, what are we encompassing here? Are they? I think that some of these things used to be under disposition for lifelong learning. Or
The first four are about student accountability,
yes, and I
about
think
having
that's,
accountability skills.
okay.
And so can I ask
A
you,
broad statement, students will be accountable for their educational experience. And then you don't need, and that could mean so many things. That could mean being on time. I think listing some of these beliefs under this category is different from what you've done in the rest of the document.
I think I agree with you that it does, you know, here we're just listing out the focus
It's
areas.
broad.
But these are, this is like, I was saying, it's like a little bit more of an editorialization. And so I have a question. Would you, let's say that you could only change one thing. Of course, I'm not saying that, but I mean, let's say that you had to like budget what change you were gonna make. Would you change the umbrella?
No,
Okay, so
I would eliminate that list of expectations and make a statement about what we're really trying to measure.
So can I respond to that as like a
Yes.
baby politician?
Mhm.
I want the community to know that this is my opinion, this is not the board's opinion. We are an on-time district. We like, kids go to class on time. That's what I want for my girls. And I also think that that is an important part of like the community understanding that like, we're not, whatever strange opinion the community might hold about public education, like doing things on time matters, it matters. And that's the Commissioner of Labor came and sat in that chair and said the same thing. You gotta teach kids how to show up on time. And so if I take this out, I wanna put it back in somewhere else.
I have a question. If we had an umbrella that would be like, students will demonstrate age appropriate understanding of how to have transferable skills to like be a citizen, society. Would the complete assignments on time or arrive for class prepared and on time, like would that come from the superintendent's interpretation of like an actionable item?
Well, that's the call that the board has to make, is do we wanna allow a district that doesn't have on time as part of our thing? And we heard that earlier this year, a few months ago. You know, I asked the superintendent to do a report about, it was the one where we learned
Yeah.
that, you know, like you can turn in your assignments until the last day of class. And then Laura said, well, that puts a ton of burden on the teachers to correct it all at the end of the school year. But it also means that those kids are not being required to do things. I mean, for my girls, I can tell you, you know, that would really affect their behavior if they're being required to turn things in on time. So it's up to us if we want to require that. And if we take it out, I want to know how we can put it back in. If we take it out here, how can we put it back in?
That's too good. But if we take it out, like you don't trust
No,
okay, that was my.
so how do you deal with
Like,
that?
If I had one thing that I would take out, I would take that out.
That whole section.
Famous, that would go, that whole section would go. First of all, I was an elementary principal for the last 4 years. We have students who, aren't on time. They arrive for class prepared and on time. They don't arrive on time. Is that the student's fault? Is it the student's fault when they don't get to school on time?
Is it-
Well, it's demonstrate age appropriate understanding of how to.
Okay.
And it's also
It's not
requires an
holding a
institutional
kid
response.
accountable
That's the
either.
key understanding of it, is that the superintendent, if students are not arriving on time, it is an organizational response is called for.
Same thing with completing assignments on time.
Well, it could be a student's here, but not, or time that might not be.
Right.
Principal be more supportive of something like students will demonstrate age appropriate understanding of district expectations on things including but not exhaustive of the following list. So they would understand the district expectations of these things.
And I think,
Then you're not judging the kid on being on time, but knowing that they should have been on time, that there's an expectation in life to be on time to things.
So then it does come back to, because your question originally was, what are we trying to prepare the children? That's what I heard. What are we trying to do here? And I think we're trying to teach them skills that can be transferred that are critical for adulthood. And to be a positive contributing member of society. Like that's what we're trying to capture here.
And
I'd love to
succeed in
hear the
learning.
students' opinion on this too.
I mean, it was more likely to succeed. Person who shows up for work late every day, not completing their assignments, doesn't include other people, doesn't treat people respectfully, or the person who does.
Yeah.
It does imply that the expectation is set. That is for sure. And we heard that loud and clear from many, many folks.
And it is an external emphasis. It's like an example, I think, of where people who don't spend their lives teaching other people's kids have these beliefs that things can be simply stated, oh, we'll just teach him to do it on time. And that's like, as professional educators know 10 times more about how that would actually be implemented and the problems with it. And so like the balance is between allowing the community to express its interest in on timeness and not putting it in such a way that it's gonna impose a really terrible burden on, so it's like there's a balance there, but I think both sides should have their say. Maybe it's 80-20. It's 80% professional education and 20% community, you know, having a strong opinion. But I do hear that this is the section of the ends policy where we are most like
Yeah. Yeah.
editorializing.
I think I think it is, I think it's a list of beliefs from one group of people, things that, that you think should, you know, should be, monitored, by the people in the schoolhouse. I think it's an overreach. You're all doing a wonderful job, like you really are. But I think that's my job. It's my job to work with teachers and students to help them be able to complete their assignments on time. I think when I look at, you know, demonstrate an understanding of how to participate in national, state, and local democracy, that is part of the social studies curriculum. And so I think when we put it there as an expectation, it feels like we're saying our students aren't doing a good enough job. Like, how do you see that? You know, are you saying you want to see people?
Yes, that's a great
Participating
example. That's a great
And
example.
so but not all of our students are US citizens, and they're not able to participate because they're not citizens, you know, in some.
Right.
You know, they don't live in households where their families are allowed to vote. How does their family participate if they're not able to? So I feel that kind of calls out a group and makes it harder for them to demonstrate, other than what they can write down on a piece of paper about what they know about being a US citizen. So that one is one that I've been feeling uncomfortable about. The one about completing assignments on time, I've been an educator for 40 years. Nobody in my career has been able to make that happen 100%. And so what we have learned to do over time is understand that not all students learn the skill and perfect it at the same time, the day it's due. And so we have become more flexible on accepting assignments. Sometimes when kids are more ready to demonstrate their knowledge, or they might need more time than a typical student because of something that's happened in their life. So I'm just worried about if the interpretation of completing assignments on time can be made by the schoolhouse, by the educators. What does that mean? Are you saying you want that assignment due on X date? How are you going to measure that? How is the superintendent going to measure that?
Well,
What would we be responsible for? Turning in a list of who didn't turn in on the same time?
before I was on
right
the school
day?
board, a very wise person told me that it was the school board's job to pass budgets.
Mhm.
I think you might know this person, but that person told me that it was the school board's job to pass budgets. So I think that there is there are a set of things that we can do in our particular community where we pass budgets with 51.8%. Burlington, it's 80%. CVU is 65%. Like Winooski, it's like 75%. But in our community, there are certain things that I think the school board needs to do to protect our schools. And so like, I think that the protection for the superintendent and for all of you is that any reasonable interpretation of this will be accepted from like a monitoring report, performance evaluation point of view. But on the other hand, if we put things in our document that are tailored to our community and to the things that they are sensitive to, I think that that is the reason why we would go beyond just kind of reproducing the EQS here. So I think that this, for me personally, is about political legitimacy and kind of like, in the same way that we say to a student, well, you may not be ready to turn your assignment in on time, which is like meeting them where they're at. I think we also have to meet the community where it's at, which is that like, we can't explain to them the nuances of what you're talking about. You have to be a professional educator to really understand that, or you have to be on a certain part of the political spectrum to really understand that. And so it's just a matter of like, putting in the things that people are concerned about, and then hoping that you guys can figure out the best way, to get it done. And then that keeps the responsibility on us. We gotta get the money from the taxpayers for you guys. That's
So
how
I
I
think
see
you're
this.
talking about me. I think maybe I told you when you asked me, what does a school board member do? I probably said one of your responsibilities is to be that, but I don't know. You said the person was a really
It was
wonderful
you, I didn't
person,
wanna
so
identify you.
I didn't want to, okay. I still just, so thank you for that compliment, because it called me a nice person. I guess I'm not supposed to respond with a question. I just think that this statement here could be more. I would feel comfortable if it said something like, and students will demonstrate an age-appropriate understanding of how to be a responsible and engaged student. And you're also talking about community too here. And then, just like the others, leave it open to the interpretation of the schoolhouse. I think you're saying something like, we won't pass the budget if we don't say we value assignments being completed on time in this document. We do stress that we want students to complete their assignments on time, and we have to make room for students. We have to meet students at all the margins in our school. And this demonstrates the type of student who does school really well. And I'm afraid if we end up being too specific and direct about what those expectations are, we are going to make school more challenging and for some of the students that need our support more than I just.
Well, one thing you said was, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I didn't mean to
I'm
interrupt
done.
you.
I'm thinking out loud. I didn't know I was.
Well, you said this was from a small group, and it wasn't a small group. I mean, how many sessions? So it wasn't just a small group, and input was taken from students,
small group
community.
Finishes, this small group finalizes the final document. I think that's what.
Yes,
yeah.
but the input was taken from the community at large, students, parents, everybody in the community was invited. The one thing you mentioned, like completing assignments on time, I'm not telling the district how things should be done. All I know is way back in the day when probably the oldest person in the room right now, or whatever.
You're not. I don't think you are.
I probably, but assignments were expected to be done on time. If they weren't, your grades would be good. And I'm not saying you should pick, but you learned quick enough that if you wanted a good grade, you got your stuff in on time. So I see what you're saying, but I don't have a problem really with the list. It's not like we're saying, things have to be done this way or this way. It's just, this is what the community wants out of their students.
Frame it. I agree with one additional way. I'd say the second most important thing I see the board doing is hiring, managing, and evaluating the superintendent. That is a core responsibility. And bringing it back to the core of what we're doing here is we're trying to make it clear to the superintendent what we're going to evaluate them on. And I don't think this is gonna happen, to your point, but if we had a superintendent that said, you know what, no more homeworks, you can't assign things. And you also, no, you can show up at school whenever you want, you know, or show up, don't show up, doesn't matter. And also if they didn't care about inclusivity. So if anything, we're spelling out the obvious, but I'm glad that it's obvious because we have a good superintendent. But as we've seen in different districts across this country and state, it can sometimes go sideways. So I'm not scared of this list, but I hear your point that it can be hard to measure. But maybe if we make this as an example of things that we'd expect them to have a comprehension of and soften the language so it's less concrete that we have to measure each of these things, but then just be able to fall back on it, that if we had a different superintendent, we could overcome it.
I like what you had said too about the district, if it even,
The district expectation.
your district expectations, I think is important. If,
I do want to emphasize though that there's no intent in this language to imply that there would ever be an expectation of 100% of students. That there's anything about what we're saying here that disrespects students who struggle, who come from other countries, and on the contrary, I think this actually calls out those needs very explicitly, particularly in the first section. I'm all for ways to make the language so that it doesn't, you clearly had a reaction that this just sounds harsh. It sounds like an overreach. So if there's something we can do with this language to make the same points and honor the community input, it is not Seamus and I writing these things down in a vacuum. This doesn't represent my set of personal beliefs that I wish to impose on the district. It doesn't have any of that right here.
So you asked for
I appreciate.
a reaction.
Yes, thank you.
And I feel like now we're in a little bit of a back and forth, and that's, you know, I know you're all trying to do a really good job. You're trying to be more specific. I do know that you talk to a lot of community members and
Students.
and students. They're community members.
No, I'm saying, but
Yeah.
this isn't just the parents saying, I want the kids on time, completed assignments on time. This is students who felt that they weren't being challenged.
We're having a reaction just because we want to make sure that we represent the thinking that went in there accurately so that you understand the way we're trying to understand what you're saying. It's
Yes.
not, it's
So
not a
I
confrontation.
Go, please.
I still believe that you have an incomplete statement. 1.2.3 is incomplete. You need to qualify what that is. And then if you,
Qualify how to like measure it.
students will demonstrate age appropriate understanding of how to, instead of a list, what is that umbrella? Be an engaging student, be a responsible student, show, you know, it could even be how to be an engaged student. It could be something simple as that, and then,
So is that what I built up your saying?
yes.
So listen, I did not know we would be up here and I've now pushed myself into sitting next to her. And she's being so gracious. So I wonder when you're saying that, Melissa, there's a whole body of knowledge about high leverage transferable skills. So the community's not wrong. There are things that we learn in school that, right, then transfer into the workplace that help us be successful in supporting our families, et cetera, et cetera. I think the question for me, in a little bit of a geeky way, is, are these those? So for instance, I just did a quick like scholarly thing, like I looked up, and it's not complete assignments on time, it's time management. Right, so it's a broader concept, it allows it to be more
Can
developmental.
I interrupt you for just a second so that you can respond to it? So what I'm looking for, and again, it's single-minded, but is something that is gonna be recognized, it's like plain spoken. It's not like a corporate euphemism, which I'm not saying that you're trying to spread corporate euphemisms. I understand that time management is the right way to describe what we're talking about, but like, we gotta reach my 80-year-old neighbor, Albert. You know, we gotta, you know, like, and on time. It's like the difference, you know, do you call education, or do you call it learning opportunities? Do you call it time management, or you call it being on time? So it's just like, there's a little bit of like, you can take a reasonable interpretation of complete assignments on time and say, well, what they're really talking about is the high leverage transferable skill known as time management. But what the school board has to do in order to pass budgets is to have, I think in this day and age, we have to have like plain language.
And again, in an effort not to, first of all, my family would be really impressed that you might have just said that I said something corporate. Might be the first in my entire life, so, so I totally understand what you're saying about the difference between, in how we talk about it. One of the reasons I know assignments are due on time is because guess what the number one accommodation in this school district is? Want to guess some percentages of how many students have that? Probably one of the highest in the district, so if we have the accommodation, that means we have the thing. So I'm not saying not to change what you're doing, it's just a curious thing I keep thinking about.
But that means they're on time. If their
They're still on
accommodation is on
time, yeah.
time, they're on time.
Right, well, what I'm saying is if you'd have to have the standard of this is due to have an accommodation that you've got an extended time. So that it is there.
But there's
It's
like
the
a,
extended funding.
there's a social, I mean, like, this, like. The ideal situation is that we let you guys do your jobs. And the way that we do let you do your jobs is by having a situation like we have in Burlington, where the community just frankly ponies up when, in a good way, which, you know, like as an affluent, you know, whatever person, I can be like, yeah, take my money, but that's not and so like, in order to get the community to buy into what we're doing, I think,
Mhm, mhm.
I. Please. I don't have a problem with this. I think that what I like about it is they are measurable. I think if we cut it to one statement that would bring me back to nebulousness, and what does that mean? I think these are measurable, and I also think that I have the knowledge and wisdom, and I think the administrative team has the wisdom to know that, that there are different ways to interpret what we mean, and I'm the one that would tell you, this is how we're interpreting it. And I agree with you about the community not understanding jargon that we talk about sometimes, and I think that when we talk about, like, even when we talk about, we've had this conversation, even when we talk about math, right? A lot of the concerns we're getting about math is because we teach something called Math 1. When everybody in the community took algebra. Math 1 is algebra, it includes algebra, but people don't know what that is. So I think just changing little words like that to get it. And one other example, in a place that I used to work, we called them curriculum nights, and everybody wondered, why don't parents come to curriculum nights? Well, it's because we didn't call them open house. You call it open house, people show up. If you call it curriculum night, I don't know what that is, I don't want to go to that. They're the same thing. So I think that completing assignments on time, I do think that speaks to the community that, yes, finally, this accountability we've been talking through, and we know internally that it's complete assignments on time, and there are also students that have accommodations that require us to change, and we have even kids who are not on an IEP who do have some family matters that cause us to be flexible with them. If they're meeting the timelines that we are putting on them with the flexibility, they're still completing them on time. And so I think we could safely, I agree, that does not mean 100% of our kids are gonna 100% turn the paper in on Friday like it's due. It means that we're gonna be equitable, not equal, right? We're not talking about equality. Equality is every kid turns it in on time, on the same day. Equity is each kid turns it in at the time that is determined with the teacher based on what is best for that student. I think sometimes when we, I think sometimes for the sake of equity, we disservice, under the guise of equity, we disservice kids because we lower expectations, thinking that we have kids in certain populations that can't meet this. And I think that we need to continue to have high expectations for all students, and knowing that internally we can make whatever adjustments we need to make to get all of our kids to perform high. I think it would be unfair to students to say, you come from, you don't speak English, therefore you will not participate in democracy. I think we are selling kids short when we say that. I think when we say, you come from you have poverty in your background, so you're probably not gonna be able to get your homework done. I think we're doing kids a disservice when we say that. I think there absolutely are kids that can, perform when you hold high standards. And I also think that we have the wisdom and the professionalism among our staff, our teaching staff, our administrative staff, to know when those times are and to meet kids where they are pretty much. So that's a little soapbox, sorry.
Well, and I don't think anybody was saying
Mhm.
that I don't think that people were saying that, but I mean, and I am sorry to have interrupted you, Nicole, when you were just starting to talk about what high leverage transferable skills are. And if there are other high leverage transferable skills that are missing from this list, I think this is, that is, you know, like what Melissa was saying, was that it's missing the point of what we were saying. We're missing a word. What are we trying to do? Students will demonstrate a age appropriate understanding of what. And I think that, yeah, it is the high leverage transferable skill. So if we're missing any, please let us know. You know, the things that we should think about. So thank you for all that.
This is the first reading. We're gonna come back at a second reading and continue this conversation. That all works for you.
Yep.
That's a robust discussion.
Is there any other board comments, students?
This might sound really. Kind of like to go chronologic. Can you put arrive? Class for Padma on time first?
You mean this one? You mean here?
Cause it just seemed out of place where it was like, you know, engaged in the class and it's like. And then get here on time. Like,
Right. Well, thanks very much to everybody. We will be discussing this more and on further reflection.
We're good.
Oh, there's
Nobody online.
that was
Wants to
my-
comment.
All right. The next, are we good on that discussion for now, board? I would be, we don't need to rush. If there's anybody who wants to say anything final, I'd love to hear it.
I have a question. If you guys change anything on that draft, would we have to redo a first reading?
No,
No, it would just be a second reading with those students.
so you're right. If it was like really substantial, then it would be like, yeah, the spirit of it, we should probably just keep it.
It seems like that's part of the system. Although I didn't know the answer to your question, to have the opportunity to keep working on it and keep getting that feedback so that we can keep working.
Got it, that makes sense. Yeah, okay.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a discussion item on revised executive limitation 2.4 financial conditions and activities. So we actually talked about this last week in the context of a proposal from the superintendent to change this. And so that was not considered a first reading because it was just proposal from the superintendent, but now the board asked me last week to look at the proposed changes and then put it up for a first reading, unless I saw something objectionable that I thought we needed to discuss more before we put it up for a first reading. So I did. Joe and I went through this with a fine tooth comb, and Joe staff provided some very good comments on why it is a good way to formulate it. So Joe, would you mind putting that on the screen again, just and instead of looking at the changes, we'll just look at the one that has the final text. So this is the same thing that we looked at last week that I didn't have any changes. Well, the only change that I was going to suggest is that here the limit is 25,000, and I was going to suggest raising the limit to 40,000. But
And yeah, I see that's not in this one. We would still like to do that because that's the state. law.
yeah, the
So we
state bidding requirement is 40,000.
Yeah, so I would recommend that number 6 would go to change from 25 to 40,000.
I don't have any concerns with this at all, but did we check with the Vermont School Boards Association for model policy on this? Is that something that's percolated in any of these discussions?
I have not. I'm not sure if they would do that part, because this is part of the policy governance and not just the traditional policies. But, our, folks that work in the, business office, one is the president of her state organization and is a genius, and she knows inside and out. So when James talks about the staff feedback, we got really good feedback from really, really smart people.
We don't have an action on this, but we need to go there. That's just first reading.
No, it's first reading. So I did look up your question just now. And the VSBA has their model policy F20. Fiscal management and general financial accountability. And so how about between now and the next meeting? Would you look at that model policy and decide what the crossover is, whether they're,
Will you send me the links since you have it
Yeah.
open? Thank you.
Is there any board comment? Dan, while you stepped out, what we said is that this policy is the same one we looked at the last week. We went through it with a fine tooth comb and I didn't personally have any problems with it. My only thought was on the, number 6, where the limit is 25,000. My suggestion was to raise that to 40,000, and that would be the same as the Vermont state bidding limit. Any board comment? Students? Nope. More interesting policies. Okay, great. Well, then that concludes our first reading of the policy 2.4. And Joe will be looking at the model policy as suggested by Tom, and also probably editing the draft to be 40,000 instead of 25,000. Yep. The next item on the agenda is the monthly financial report. And I will give my understanding of what this means, and you can correct me. Basically, over the last few years, we have expected the superintendent to give us quarterly monitoring reports on this exact executive limitation. And they said, instead of doing quarterly monitoring reports, it would probably be better if we gave you monthly reports that you didn't have to vote on, and then we'll do one annual monitoring report.
Yep, that's completely correct. And Dean Marie's here to take you through the first one, which will look different than previous or than ones that are coming.
In the future.
Because this is the first one and where the timing, where we are with and close of last fiscal year and whatnot. I'm sure she'll explain all that.
And just a note on the policy side, I think we're actually gonna have to change whatever. There's the list of monitoring reports. It actually lists that one that's being done quarterly, so it's minor, but just. And again, structure, not like saying we're doing something.
I changed it internally, but if the board needs to vote on it, I can bring that to the.
I can't remember what policy, it's embedded in one of the policies, but we can, I don't see it as remotely urgent, just setting a timer in the back of my head.
Sorry, you guys were too fast for me, I'm not as prepared. Okay. Sharing my screen slowly, okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna go through first is our pre-audit year-to-date for the budget year that we have just closed. And so I think you all received this in your board packet, so you've seen this before tonight? Okay, perfect, thank you.
you'll see that in this first lines 3 through 13 are our expenses for the fiscal year. And, I'll just quickly go column by column. So working budget is listed in column C, and that's the total of the budget that we had from last year, which was $71 million. We call it a working budget because we do move things around a little over time as the year goes along, as the needs change. So that may look a little bit different than exactly what was proposed at the beginning of the budget year. The second column is the pre-audit year to date. So, what we said we were gonna spend and what looks like we've spent. The third column is encumbrances. So of note is, line 5, number E5, this has 400,000. So basically, we've paid everybody, and then line 4, we've paid everybody for all of FY 26. And in line 5, that encumbrance of 400,000 is retirement payments that have not yet been posted into the correct retirement accounts. That takes a bit of time and energy for the ladies to do. So that's one piece of work that just has not yet been done. And then pre-encumbrance is a little more meaningful when we get to the expense side, but that's money that is like in the process of being encumbered and hasn't fully been, so you're not going to see that in your in this section. So our total, this column here, our total sort of leftover expenses is $1.5 million, which is about 2.15% of our budget. So in a $71 million, almost $72 million budget, that's really, really good. As Joe said, you know, Elizabeth and April are an amazing team and have worked in school district finance for many years, and to get that close is excellent. So it will change a little as time goes along. Like I know April was saying when Elizabeth walked out the door today, she still has a stack of invoices that are being are things that came in and we're just getting invoices on them that need to be charged back to FY 26. So that 1.5 million is a little bit of a moving target still. This is one of the reasons why we push on our team so hard to sort of stop spending early and get all of your things before June 30 so that we can wrap up these books. Because now, you know, we're ready to open the doors and bring the teams back in, and everyone's like, you know, let's spend all the stuff for FY 27, which we need to get that rolling. But at the same time, they're trying to wrap up FY 26. So it's a bit of a challenge. So that's good news. Actually, I don't really have any bad news to share with you. That's more good news. And then in our general fund revenues, so money that came into the district, you'll see a couple different lines here that are in the red that you may have questioned when you saw them. Some of we get revenue from a variety of sources, and actually one interesting thing that I learned when I was discussing this with April today, when we invoice someone, the way the system works, it credits it to us that we've already received the payment when we in fact maybe have not received the payment. So that's a little bit of an adjustment there too. But so let's look at line 49, which is the impact fees. This is so that number of 731,000 was the number that the city gave us, that they said, here's what we think we're going to send you for impact fees. It's really a spitball on their end, and they try to be as accurate as possible, but so they told us 731. You'll see we actually only received $478,000 from them. So it shows us that we're in the red by $252,000. Like that money's not ever coming. Like we just.
So it was gonna be my question.
Yeah, no, it's never coming. Like like I said, we get that number from the city, and I don't mean this in any demeaning way at all. They give us the number they bet to the best of their ability, and then they give us the reality. And this year that number was off by 250,000, so. Which is, just unfortunate. There are other things that we, that we have a little bit of, swing on that we try to, so let's just talk about. This one, our special ed excess costs, and then our special ed reimbursements, that are considered extraordinary. So those two lines you also will see are in the negative by 120,000. Those, we work with our Nicole and her team as they're putting together the case management plans for our students, and we do the best of our ability to determine what those costs are going to look like. Some years they just end up differently. That's the line 55 that I have highlighted right now, special ed reimbursements, those are the extraordinary costs. Those are a bit more out of our control. April and I were digging a little bit into the special ed excess cost line. She understood that to be, we are a school that takes tuition students in. So say we have a student who comes to us from Isle Lamont, who's tuitioned in, we bill that town, whatever the tuition is. And if there are costs in excess of that, then what we have initially thought the expense would be, that's where they land right there for a student who would be a special education student. So again, it's a big it appears to be a big number. It's in red. We do the very best we can, and in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty close to accurate. Let's scroll down here. So our total, so you'll see April's notes in here. As of right now, we are anticipating a surplus of 1.79 million, which is the result really of underspending our approved expenditure budget. That's the 2.15, and then receiving more offsetting revenues than was originally budgeted. There's one line, let me see if I can go back and find it, where she was very conservative and it came in a lot higher. So sometimes we just aren't able to predict as accurately as we would like. Like, I think it's this one that we were talking to, this tuition line where she put in 50 and we got 0, and it's hard to, sometimes those are hard to determine. So, but overall, we're really happy with what the fiscal year ended like. We have started and to kind of put out there for you all, we've talked about what can we do with our excess money, right? So we have to go back to the voters with that money. In my mind, we have 3 different choices. One you all hate, which is we throw that money at the new budget year and buy down the tax rate, right? Nobody really enjoys that idea. The other is we move some into our capital reserve, which we've done. And then I think, Jen, you would ask me about what we call, it's like an operational savings reserve, which really is an ed stabilization account. So that would be another choice of a savings bucket we could put money into, ask the voters to put money into, and that would be things that we could use, which would be like salary and benefits. So if we decided like, oh gosh, we have these students and we need to suddenly hire 6 more English teachers that we hadn't budgeted for, that we could use that educational stabilization fund for a situation like that. Not capital reserves, not facilities issues, that kind of. So 2 separate ways to sort of have some savings on hand. The only way that we can, Joe said, we can't give it back to the voters, and the only way we can give it back is if you want to put it into the budget to buy down the tax rate. So,
Do we have an estimate for like what is in the savings account right now? Because we do have some accounts.
Yes, we have the one, oh gosh, I wish I don't know the answer to that one. We have facilities bond still with funds available in it. And then we do have a capital reserve that had a small number before we went to the voters this last time and asked them. So oof, I hate to guess, but I think it's I don't want to guess.
I mean,
But I
that'd
can
be
find that.
interesting. That would be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
We'll definitely come to you as we go through the budget season, so you'll know what is in those funds and then,
Cause
you
these
know.
were the monies that were transferred from our overage before and
Yeah.
how that
Exactly.
looks.
I feel like before we went to the voters last time, it was like 250,000, like it wasn't a very big number in capital reserve, which, for a district with 5 buildings, like our
71 million,
yeah,
Mm,
250,000 is like,
5% or whatever. I don't know.
yeah, so it wasn't big before, and I just don't remember what we added, and so I will have that as we go through the budgeting process, yeah. You're gonna say something?
I said it was like half a roof, right?
Yes, it was like half a roof. It was a single air handling unit, yeah.
Right.
Okay, let me stop let me stop sharing this one and then I'll share it with you. Okay, so this is our financial report as of August 14th for our current year. So this one, it's so early in the fiscal year, it's not as exciting it's not as exciting to share. I don't want to say that it's not accurate, because it's definitely accurate. It's just like, doesn't tell the story as well as when we're halfway or 3/4 the way through the year. So here's our working budget again, was 73.9 million. You'll see that, so we had, 41 million in salaries. Year to date, we've spent 1.2 million. We've encumbered, so we have a hold on, we're planning on paying out another $35 million. Right now, so a pre-encumbrance is in the process of being fully put on reserve. So that can be a position that we're currently posting for, that's vacant, that we're recruiting for, but we don't have anybody in that role yet. So that's a pre-encumbrance. So it's like halfway kind of, it's like purgatory in the Catholic world. It's like halfway between paid for and on hold. So that leaves us, so those are positions that we're hoping to fill, right? So that leaves us 800,000 that we've got left in the salary line, which isn't a very big number, but that's okay. I mean, we're hiring, it's the beginning of the school year, we're hiring everybody, and so I'm not uncomfortable with that number. So really, I guess what I would say is, like, you can see 73 million in the working budget year to date, what we have spent year to date, what we've got encumbered, what we've got a hold on, what's still in the middle land, and then what's left over. So right now we've got 11.53% of our budget unspent, unencumbered, which is good. People are putting in their POs and putting holds on the money for all of the different purchases and services and staffers that we need to run the school buildings each year.
Is there a target, usually 8 or 9% for that?
That's a good question. We haven't done a report like this before, so I don't want to speak to what our target would be. When I had this conversation with April, the business manager, she was like, yep, that's good. Like, she had no concerns about that, so.
One of the things, Jean Marie, I think would be interesting is to show, and I think this is what we're talking about, like having some rateability and being able to evaluate it over time. But where was our budget? What did we project? What did we have left over?
Yeah.
Where was our budget? What did we project? What do we have left over? And if we see that when we're building our budget for the next time around, if we're consistently going to be off by a couple of percent.
Yeah.
Then do we need to, perhaps take out some of the contingencies or things that maybe we had put in there, and that money's just not being spent, so that we can actually hit it when we're coming through and not going out for more money than we need from the taxpayer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really fine line of trying to be as accurate as possible, but also kind of planning for the worst at the same time. And then, you know, like Joe and I have had conversations about, our HR team works really hard in recruiting for our positions, but there are some positions that, you know, we post because we need them, but some of us aren't real hopeful that they're all gonna be filled, right?
Right.
And so we can't say, oh, your student, we needed to hire a paraeducator or interventionist for your student, but boy, are they really hard to find. So we're not gonna post for that position, right? So
No,
so
you
we
gotta put
have
it out
to,
there.
yeah, so that's always gonna give us a swing, like those posted and unfilled, no matter the position, is gonna give us a swing in our budget,
But I
so.
think it's looking at like the probability of, are we going to be spending 100% of our budget, yay or nay? And if
Right.
the answer is no, and we've got a track and you've got a trajectory there that we're having a surplus. And then you also have some money that is going into other accounts, so you're, you know, whether it's a rainy day fund or whatever you wanna call it.
Yeah,
You know, then, you know, perhaps that does give us a little latitude to.
yeah, I think that as we build those, like if we're able to build an educational stabilization fund and that capital reserve, if they're at a place where we're comfortable to really under budget, like, the business office staff are really good at their job and feel a lot of ownership in this, and if we run in the red,
Oh, yeah.
someone's gonna have a coronary. So,
Even with the stabilization.
yeah, I think not, like, if we're at a place where we have those reserves, like, they're always just looking at those numbers and trying to make sure that we're as accurate, and I think that we have done so much cleanup in the last couple of years of cleaning up these books and having the accounts be as accurate as possible, and working with our principal team as we're creating those budgets as each year goes on, we're getting better and better at it.
Sure.
So 2% coming in with 2% excess. That's a lot of money when I'm a taxpayer, and I totally get that, but I just think that's the line of we have to balance being accurate in our budgeting, protecting ourselves so we don't find ourselves in a terrible situation, and honoring the taxpayers and the burden that they're carrying, right? So
Right.
I get it. for
But
sure.
yeah, and I think that's the thing, like looking at it, and especially if you have many years of data and you can see where it looks.
Yeah,
Then it becomes this probability, to
Yeah.
say, well, are we gonna hit it, or maybe we go at 98% instead of 100%, because we know.
right.
And I think that's an important message also that we're communicating to the taxpayers, that we are
Right.
being such good stewards. You know.
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
That we're looking
I
at, so
know.
anyway, just some thoughts.
Yeah.
I know you probably don't. Off the top of your head, but
You always ask me questions I don't have answers to, and I'm used to it now.
historically, how do we typically end a fiscal year? Like,
Well, listen, this is the beginning of my third year, so, and the beginning of my second year in this role, so, in my time year, we have had, an overage left, right? We haven't been in a deficit situation, but I wasn't here in the years that we were building the ZEMS or any of those bigger projects, so, so I can't tell you much beyond
do
what
you
I was.
remember what last year? What
Last year was
we were
the
over?
2.5 million, right?
Yeah.
No,
Two
that
and a
was
half
at,
percent?
that was at FY 25.
Yes, that would have been FY 25, yeah,
About
So this is, no,
2.5 million.
1.5 is the
Two and a half
FY.
Is that
Yeah, that's
scooped in?
what
So that would have been.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah.
Like on that.
So that's substantial, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Well. Yeah, we can go back and get that, yeah, but, yeah. It's a work in progress, you know, I call this an amoeba because it's just constantly changing, and what we plan for and then what we actually need, we're, you know, always readjusting, and, I would say that outside of our salary and benefits line, the other big budgets that we have in the district are, our facilities budget, right? We're putting a ton of money into our buildings all the time. And then secondly, our IT budget, and sometimes I like get really uncomfortable with the size of the IT budget, and I'm sure you do too, but you know what we don't spend money on anymore, Dan? Textbooks
no,
and chalk and calculators, right? Like, it's just a shift of the funds from one to the other. So, and sometimes we just need to do those things. We need to have a little cushion in some of those budgets because things come up that are needed, right?
No,
So,
I get, it. I mean,
Yeah.
but if we're over and our reserve funds
are healthy,
are healthy,
yeah,
we need to find a way, in my opinion, to
Yeah.
give it back to the taxpayers.
yeah, yeah. No, I don't disagree, yeah.
And if that, even if that means your budget is flat. Right?
Like, cause flat is still less because of all the inflation.
Right.
And I agree, I think I agree with everything everybody's saying.
Yeah.
And first, we have to make sure we have those reserve funds.
Yes,
because
yeah.
We try to
Yeah.
budget this zero.
Yeah,
As
for
long as
sure.
they're healthy.
Yeah,
But I mean, that would be a huge win if we could do that and say our budget is flat this year.
right,
Mhm.
yeah,
That'd be
And
huge.
not put the burden on
On
the
the taxpayer,
district
yeah.
to.
Right.
to cut
To
and cut.
carry that risk on you, knowing what our policies say about.
Right, yeah, that's right, exactly, that's sort of the rub, right, of we need to do and support our students and our teachers to be bigger and better than we were before, but we also need to honor the request from the taxpayers that they are still able to stay in their homes and it's an affordable bill
Right.
that we pass along, so.
Everybody's
yeah.
tired of me talking about Ohio, but a benefit of Ohio is you're rewarded for saving money, right? You can carry over your budget, so if there's
Yeah.
any state legislators. We can do that, right? Well,
That advocacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Point taken. And less than 3% budget variance is actually healthy. I'm not really concerned with 2.5. If it was like
Yeah.
5% over, 5%
Yeah.
under, then we'd be.
Yeah.
another problem.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
I,
still hard to look at because you know that 1.5, what that would mean in terms of the percent of tax increase. Even if there wasn't
Yeah.
a state buy down every year, we would still be running in very reasonable ranges with that.
yeah,
If I'm remembering my math, when Tim used to do the, you know, the moving
if you
things
move
around.
this
and
and there, yeah. Yeah. And so maybe that's something that, so if we end up with 1.7 million or 1.5 million left from FY 26. Do we do some things with that money, go back, buy down the next budget year, put some into reserve, like, I mean, that's not my decision to make, but. Those are things that we can consider to help the load for the next year and in future years, right? So.
So, yeah, if, I would suggest that if we have any more suggestions about the form of these, work directly with Joe and figure that out.
The only other thing I would say that would be helpful to add on to this is whatever your reserves look like.
Look like, yeah,
If you can add
That's easy
that, I
enough,
think
yeah.
that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And if you've got them in different buckets, like this is facilities or. I forget what the other term was.
capital reserve.
Oh, capital reserve, but there was another one.
We have a facilities bond right now that is not completely exhausted. We have a capital reserve and then we could create an education stabilization.
Yeah, that's what I mean,
fund.
those three.
Yeah,
Just to show that, I think would
Yeah.
be helpful, again, just for full transparency with where we are with our
But we don't
financials.
have that education.
we don't have that. We have not yet created
That
that.
could be created.
Yeah,
So it could be empty for now, but. maybe
yeah,
funded.
it'd be a big zero for now. But we could do that. We could go to the voters in the spring and ask them as one of the ballot items. So.
Well, this is great. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. I think this is very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. I know there's another version of a financial report that the ladies would really like to provide to you, but I thought this was the easiest one that they could produce now, and it seemed to me to be the most indicative of the items that I thought you guys would
It's
be. most interested-
digestible.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you have too much stuff and it's like.
Yeah,
Well, I think future ones will have like more pie charts and those
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
things. that make it
they'll be
visual.
prettier. Yeah,
But
And there's always the interest in longitudinal data. It's like, you know, are
Exactly.
things getting better or are they getting worse?
right,
Yep.
right, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is our only action item tonight, and it's, rather surprisingly, to appoint another board member to the Act 170 Merger Committee. And that is because in discussions with, the Winooski, board, their board chair is Nicole Nace, and she is a lawyer and actually the former head of the VSBA and the former general counsel for the VSBA. And she reminded us that actually we need to have a merger committee composition based on weighted pupils. And so the choice was between if Winooski should send one or two. They were kind of asking, should they send one or two? If Winooski had sent two people, that would mean that Burlington would have to send 5 people.
Oh, my God.
And we'd have three.
And we'd have
Yeah,
3.
that's a lot.
So we said, just keep it to 1, please. And that's what I believe Winooski did or will do in the next couple days. So point is, last meeting, we appointed me to the Act 170 merger committee, and we should appoint one other person to it. To be prepared for when Winooski has 1 or has 3.
Gonna take that as.
Yeah.
And it has to be a board member.
It has to be a board member, yes. So
Alyssa?
who wants to be on it?
Alyssa.
Nobody volunteers, I think Emily gets it.
Typically, the way things are done. If. No. No. Okay, I will volunteer on that.
Well, I would nominate Dan. I would entertain. a
And I
motion
could
to
attend
nominate
these
Dan.
virtually if need be. Okay,
I would entertain a motion to nominate Dan Boyer to be the second board member for the Act 170 merger committee. So Tom moves, Alyssa seconds. Is there any discussion? And this is an action item, so we will be taking public comment on it. All those in favor? Aye. Dan, congratulations.
I have a question with that. Is it possible, or would there be any opportunity if a student rep wanted to just, participate to hear kind of what's going on, some of the discussion?
Public meeting.
Yeah, because I think that would be really interesting. If you guys are-
I think it would be great if there, I don't know if the law allows it or disallows it,
Actually,
but to have students on that study committee.
There's a group of students who are trying to, we're trying to figure something out with that. But nothing concrete to come out of that yet.
A group of students at SB or
No, around the
across,
state.
okay.
The next item on the agenda is the superintendent report.
Right, I'm gonna keep it relatively short, and I'm gonna give you an update on the Chittenden Central CISA. I was recently elected chair of the newly created Chittenden Central Cooperative Educational Service Area, which includes Burlington, Colchester, Essex Westford, South Burlington, and Winooski. The CISA board has now met twice and is beginning the work of establishing the organization required under Act 170. At our August 18th meeting, just yesterday, the board confirmed that regular meetings will be held on the 4th Monday of each month from 6 to 7:30, beginning on September 28th. We also agreed to use a consistent meeting location rather than rotating among districts, and that location is here because I'm here and we have tech folks that can help us here. Much of our discussion focused on the significant number of implementation questions that remain unanswered. These include the CISA is legally established as a body politic in corporate, how we obtain a federal tax ID and bank account, how the required education cooperative fund is established, how startup grant dollars are accessed, what fiscal administrative systems must be created, what insurance or bonding is required for the treasurer, and how the executive director position is expected to be funded and structured. The board also discussed the importance of avoiding a situation in which all 7 CISAs independently hire attorneys or consultants to answer the same basic organizational questions. There was strong interest in having the state provide coordinated guidance, model documents, and training so that CISAs can begin operating consistently and efficiently. Following the meeting, actually this morning, I sent a letter on behalf of the CISA board to the Agency of Education, the governor's office, legislative leadership, education committee chairs, and legislators representing the 5 member communities. The message I sent was simple. We want to run the CISA in good faith and want it to be successful, but we need a coordinated process for getting answers to the fundamental legal, financial, organizational, and operational questions that remain unresolved. The board is scheduled to meet again on September 28th, and between now and then, I hope to continue to seek guidance from the Agency of Ed and legislative leaders, and we'll keep the South Burlington board informed as this work develops. That is my report. Any questions?
Great email with 30 specific questions, so I hope you get answers to them.
Thank you. 30 very, well, no.
Any other board question or comment? All right, well, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And there's nothing that we need to take individual action on, so. Are there any objections to the consent agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is passed by consent. The next item on the agenda is setting the agenda for the September 2nd regular meeting. I do. All right. All of our standard stuff. We have a ends policy update, second reading. That should be a community forum. We have a monitoring report on treatment and community. A second reading of 2.4 that we discussed tonight. Are there any monitor reports we need to catch up on?
No, we're caught up, but just a reminder, this monitoring report is an external review, which I believe means that somebody outside the district does that review.
Okay, so we're gonna have to look at that. Then superintendent's report, are there any topics in particular that people would like to ask the superintendent about?
The only thing I'd ask about is, just website updates.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be a good one too.
And obviously, Joe, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah. We'll probably talk about the start of this year.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
See some. That's gonna probably be a standing anything inside.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have anything in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, right, this is next 2 weeks time.
So your next meeting for CISA is in December.
September.
September.
Yeah, September.
Yeah.
We'll be everyone.
And I think at the last meeting, we talked about. An update on things like. The foundation formula, but I think that the. Result of that discussion was that we were interested in hearing about it as soon as, and if anything new came up. But that's likely, there's not a report until December, so it's unlikely for there to be anything.
Late November, December, I think would be the ideal time, and that's also when bringing your legislators in to discuss that and hear their thoughts and impress upon them your perspectives and concerns and good value.
So I think. If this sounds good, is there any other thoughts on this agenda?
Like to remind you all that starting in September, the second meeting of each month, principals will be here with students to do a little short presentation on something cool that's going on in their building. So we're very excited.
That's really cool.
The second meeting of each month.
Great. Okay, well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move that non-debatable motion.
Tom moves,
Second.
Dan seconds, I almost said it, but I didn't. All those in favor? Aye. Here, I didn't. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
No.
Fine, aye.